I am the one who knocks.
Where's that line from? Anyone? Anyone know that one? It's from Breaking Bad. I love Breaking Bad. But here's the problem with society. This is what's always so sad. I asked people to see if they understood the message, right? If they understood the Walter White character. Okay? I tried asking them. You know what sort of answers I got? Seriously. Okay. This is what people thought was the point of Breaking Bad. These are the answers, right? Don't do drugs. Drug dealing is not a viable career path. Stick to real estate investment and retirement planning. Okay, that was a mortgage broker. Don't trust Jesse. Use only government-approved hitmen. Quit while you're ahead. Look, okay. No one got it. So as usual, Joe here, author, podcaster, whiz kid, had to come in and clarify the meaning for everyone. Now, I love this show. It's a very celebrated show. It's not a new show, right? It's been around for a while. It's a classic. It gripped people at the time. But again, the deeper symbolism. It's like people like Vince Gilligan and what's the actor's name? Aaron Paul's Jesse. Bryan Cranston. These incredible artists come along. They put a beautiful message, a timeless warning, good education, good morals, entertaining. It's funny. It's gripping. It's suspenseful. They do all the hard work and package it up, and still people don't get it. I empathize. I'm an artist. I'm an author. I'm a video maker. I'm a dabbler. I know the pain. Okay, so let's dive in. Today we're going to focus on a psychological deconstruction of Walter White. I did a psychological deconstruction of the Voldemort character in Harry Potter. That's been a popular video, my favorite ever video I think I've done on the channel. So I wanted to follow up on the YouTube and the podcast. You can watch this on YouTube, by the way. If you want the visuals, I'll try and make it visually stimulating, but also it's in podcast version. So we're going to be talking about doing it for family. We're going to talk about his motivations. We're going to talk about tragic irony. God, we're going to cover the whole thing. But yeah, we're going to dig deep, and you can see if you agree or if you disagree, if you noticed it, if you didn't notice it, and why that might be. And if you are like Walter White, or Jesse, or any of the other characters in any way. How about we start with a very brief recap and spoiler alert, okay? Spoiler alert. If you don't want the spoilers, this is the time to tune out, okay? All right, so let's recap the storyline of Breaking Bad. We're introduced to Walter White, a high school chemistry teacher who was clearly capable of a lot more. He's a bit of an underachiever. In his past, it's really important to know, he was 1/3 of this burgeoning research company called Grey Matter, which he co-founded with Elliot and Gretchen Schwartz. There's a little bit of a love triangle here because Gretchen was actually originally Walter's girlfriend, and he left the company because of complications in their relationship. And from what I remember, the complications in their relationship was because of inferiority he had with Gretchen's family and their wealth. So there's a little bit of the backdrop. He misses out on this company absolutely skyrocketing their research, getting, I think, maybe even a Nobel Prize or huge recognition. And that just sows his kind of, spite and envy and ruining of like a missed opportunity at career achievement and success. But for all intents and purposes, he has a lovely little life. He has a wife, Skylar. He has a teenage son, Walt Jr., who has cerebral palsy. And then early in the show, he accidentally becomes a dad again. His wife falls pregnant, unplanned pregnancy. And that adds to his familial responsibilities and adds to the tension and the drama of the big bombshell that kicks off the whole drama of the show, the whole storyline, Walter White's terminal cancer diagnosis. It's a little sad, jaunting, shocking, and it obviously stuns Walter. And in the wake of this really emotional and existential kind of threat, he reacts as any of us would, seeking to provide for his family and ensure their long-term care. He turns to drug dealing. Okay, maybe not what I would do. I'm not a drug guy, but also I lack Walter's chemistry knowledge and scientific brilliance. So I guess I can't blame him.
But yeah, obviously a bit of a dramatic move from Walter, even under the circumstances. And he manages to link up with Jesse Pinkman. Jesse Pinkman's an old student of Walter's who's kind of fallen foul of the law. He's a bit of an addict, a junkie. He certainly talks like one. And he becomes Walter's connection to the drug world, while Walter is obviously the manufacturer and the chemistry guy, and they have a classic business partnership. And obviously this is where the metaphors for our lives and work and career kind of start, and why it's not actually a show about the drug part, guys. It's got a deeper meaning. Another layer of tension that exists over the entire series pretty much is that Walter's brother-in-law is a DEA agent, a drug enforcement agency, I believe that stands for. So he's responsible for getting drug dealers and putting them in jail. Walter is creating his own drug empire right under his brother-in-law's unsuspecting nose. A lot of tension, a lot of drama, great TV. This is the tension of the show. The original purpose being to provide for Walter's family nobly in the face of terminal cancer diagnosis.
Skylar, I'm doing this for you, for our family.
The threat of detection from his very own brother-in-law, and the expansion of this whole little drug foray into just getting just what Walter needs for his family.
Skylar, I'm doing this for you, for our family.
And into becoming this empire. Oh wow, it just goes to show how little Walter kind of knows about himself when he goes into this. Now, I'm not here to judge. Maybe you watch this show and say, look, this is great. This is a guy who's able to fulfill his potential and finally become successful. And despite the consequences and repercussions on family and loved ones, it's just great to see a high achiever achieving highly. Maybe you think Walter White's a purist. He's just in it for the chemistry. He's not a drug guy. And just because he's making drugs, someone else will come and fill that void. So it might as well be him. So even though it's illegal, is he doing something wrong, really? He's just doing what he's good at. He's finally fulfilling his potential. I love this show because it takes all the kind of maybe phony or flawed values in our kind of society, and it creates this massive knockout competition where these values are forced to face off over 5 seasons and thread through all these different characters, from family to colleagues to collateral damage characters and victims, and you're forced to ask, who's a victim, who's a perpetrator, who starts off a victim and shifts into a perpetrator, who starts off as a perpetrator and shifts into a victim, who's biting off more they can chew. Pretty much everyone. And you get to see this whole knockout competition with the ego versus reality, and you get to see who triumphs in the end.
Now, again, I'm going to talk about tragic irony in the series and the Walter White character. But another concept I want to introduce here is the concept of an off-ramp. Experience is like a freeway or a highway. Off-ramps are your chance to change the path. What I love about this show is it shows you off-ramp after off-ramp after off-ramp after off-ramp after off-ramp after off-ramp. And Mr. White doesn't seem too keen on taking any of these very convenient off-ramps. Now, the problem we'll get into, obviously, who would have thought that in the drug world you mix with the wrong people, you upset people, you set a flow of events, right? Now, I'm going to make a little segue here and take a step up and out and talk a bit about Vince Gilligan, the show's main creator. I think I'm not sure, but they do Breaking Bad, but also Better Call Saul, which was a spin-off show from this. The Saul character is a lawyer character who comes from Breaking Bad. I think both shows are excellent. I really love their style of storytelling, and why I love it is a big theme in their work is always the tragic irony stories, right? People who seem to mean well, meeting harm, and unraveling in bad circumstances for themselves and the people, and normally the people they care about. And it's not just the protagonists in each show, like Walter White in Breaking Bad, and the Saul character, Saul Goodman, in Better Call Saul. It's the characters connected to them. It's how it creates this little spider web of chaos. All right. So one of the characters who is in both shows is Mike. Mike's older. He's a ex-policeman, and his son. Again, spoiler. His son also became a policeman and died because of corruption. This leaves behind Mike's granddaughter, Kaylee, who he loves more than, it's the only good thing really left in his life, and then his daughter-in-law. This is the classic. So you can see mirroring Saul Goodman. I won't go into his story too much, but Mike, Walter White. Three characters all have a similar starting point. They start off with, and I always love this phrase, the best of intentions, but also they start off seemingly innocent. They haven't done anything wrong. They're on the good side of society. And then what happens as a consequence of trying to do things or the situations they're caught in, they start to slowly, that's why I love the Vince Gilligan storytelling, one aspect of it. It's a slow lane drift. It's like the lines start to disappear first, and then you can't tell which lane you're in anymore. And it's like this, slow. That's why I'm a big fan of this. The other thing that's really clever is a lot of the way an episode of Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad starts is with a random scene or shot. It's never dramatic or extravagant filmmaking. Very subtle, very measured, very plain at times, like an eyeball floating in a pool or belonging to a toy, or a child riding a bike. And you're given this opening to an episode and you have no idea where it's leading. And then the events of the episode unfold, and then later it becomes clear, everything links back up, and you see why that was introduced earlier. Why I love that is because it mirrors the beautiful message being carved out by these shows. It mirrors the beautiful message of, again, second order, unanticipatable, things you can't anticipate being problems. Not being able to see, and this is again why I refer to Nassim Taleb and all his work, about the limitations of our poor, tiny, little, overworked human minds, and our inability, despite how clever we think we are, our inability to see too far ahead, right? To navigate and know the complex. So you see all these crisscrossing people who have, between the two shows, Walter White being the main one, you see all these crisscrossing consequences, people always starting out in the best of places. Now, you don't need to be Einstein to figure out that maybe there is an opportunity to recognize ourselves in these characters, to recognize ourselves when we have that sort of journey. We all start as babies, and I'm pretty sure from there we're all pretty innocent. So we all have something of a chance, even though we're put in very difficult situations where there's a temptation to compromise and take risks and get in with bad crowds. But yeah, what's interesting with the Walter White thing is that to some extent, once he kicks this dangerous journey off, the off-ramps are hard to take, because it's like, once you're in, how do you get out? And his idea was that he was just going to get in and get out, get into drug dealing, use his knowledge to make a better quality crystal meth, and then extract himself, because it was about family, right? Skylar, this is for family. This is for you. Everything I do is for my family. See how I even got the Walter White facial hair set up. And he doesn't have that at the start. This is how committed I am to the character. Okay, so we've got a few little starters off there, right? Starting off innocent, the lines of the lanes disappearing, circumstances putting us in a difficult spot, right? People like Mike, son died, got to try and provide for Kaylee. Walter White, family, they're not going to have much money. He's got to try and provide for them after he dies. Unfulfilled potential, cancer diagnosis. So I love all these character recipes that the show creators put together. second order effects. Hopefully you're tracking all this so far. I think you will. I think you can do it. So we'll zero in a little bit more on Walter White. That was the promise, right? He's our main focus here. He's the main point of analysis. And we've got that unfulfilled potential. And basically, you know, someone who didn't have that put in the same situation might behave differently. But he does mirror us when we go into the world, I think. We all have a sense of responsibility, either to ourselves or others. We have ways of getting ahead. And while most of us, especially the people who take the time to watch a video like this, won't be tempted into like drug dealing per se. Again, that's a hyperbole, it's an exaggeration to make the point, I think, to tell the story. We're tempted into smaller things. I mean, like making it all about us, screwing people over on our way up and justifying it, making out something's for family or for other people when it's really for us, making out we want to help other people when it's really for us. We all get a miniature version of the same sort of path. And you might ask yourself when you watch Breaking Bad, where do you start to see the deviation? Is it before? So is the deviation for Walter White from the good path, let's call it, although what is, you know, that could be another whole conversation, what's good path, but where does the deviation start? Is it before the point of the narrative we get thrown into? Is it after? Is it, you know, when he first gets in trouble? Where is the point that the deviation starts? Now, what I really focus on is how the phrase I would use is how Walter White starts to actualize once he finds his thing, once he gets to be the man for once. Right, so I think it's very symbolic that he adopts the alter ego, Heisenberg. So Heisenberg, I believe, is one of Hitler's, I think, scientists, very unethical, or there's serious questions asked about Heisenberg, the real Heisenberg. And so he adopts that as his alter ego. Obviously, there's like a level of preserving his anonymity, but also it serves two purposes, right? And it's convenient. It's a convenient alter ego for him to rise into. And the forbiddenness, right, and the outlaw nature of it is almost like adds to the attraction. It adds to the thrill for Walter White. It makes it so much more appealing and attractive and addictive, and makes him feel so much more alive. And whilst this is a delicate scene to talk about, the scene where he goes and, you know, kind of takes Skylar and, you know, the kind of bedroom couple stuff, and he really takes her by surprise and takes her literally and figuratively from behind, and she's shocked. But see, that's that virility awakened in him is not a coincidence. It's very much, when you look at a human being in our constitution, especially a man and a masculine, it's very much him realizing a sense of manhood, because in his life, he's so clearly deprived of that feeling of manhood. I've never thought of this before, but he reminds me a lot of the Kevin Spacey Lester character in American Beauty, which I definitely will do a full episode on at some point as well. And that's another man who doesn't feel like the breadwinner, the head of the house, doesn't feel strong. The narrative of what a man is here. Like, there's a narrative that exists, and that's what a man is. And they clearly feel short of it. And this creates a dynamic where an opportunity to bridge that gap fills them with a real, it must fire all sorts of neurochemicals, probably a lot of dopamine and a lot of testosterone. And so what you see is this character kind of now thriving. So he had the initial purpose, which was supposedly, it's for my family, Skylar, everything I do. But then you see an added convenient benefit. An added convenient benefit. Walter White, you dog. And this is something, I don't know if this is, if I'm layering too much on here, but I always think of this thing called maybe intention hijacking. And this could be just chronic overthinking. But I always wonder, do we have pure intentions again, to do something for family, to do something for others. Do we have them, and do these sneaky ego things, do they kind of just, are they waiting there and then they kind of latch on? It's like, oh, there's something I can corrupt. Like that's the way I can get my host to like pursue whatever the ego wants, like power, control, authority, attention, influence, status, whatever it's come to covet, whatever it's come to associate with probably safety at a younger stage in our lives, through culture, through external messaging, role models, all these things we internalize like little, I know, like mold that just really starts to grow in the dark. So are we all along looking for, like, so at the point where Walter White, cancer diagnosis, terminal, sad, shocking, scared, you know, is it at that point that he's actually looking for this power play? Or does that kind of Heisenberg thing, is that really just after the fact? It's a really interesting question. And another possibility I think about is, do we as people have certain like underlying coping mechanisms? And these coping mechanisms will rush to the surface when we're threatened, right? So terminal cancer diagnosis is, yes, like a medical thing, but it's also a major, on the level of like the mind, the psyche, the ego, the soul, it's also like a massive power loss, right? Like a massive loss of control over your life. And so the way a Walter White type, with all this inbuilt like inadequacy and frustration and ruining and missed opportunity and missed out on grey matter and watched his friends succeed and all that, and then they're trying to like, they're offering to pay for his treatment and support his family, which he finds really condescending, right? So is that basically at the core of this, you know? And is that therefore prejudicing him to react the way he reacts? Whereas for someone like me, in the same situation, my response might be to try and make it mean something, right? So to try and get like a positive meaning from it, because that's kind of how, you know, I tend to operate, right? And that's almost a power in a way, to be able to control the meaning, not let something for me become a dark thing, but sort of be able to, that feeling of conquering it and make it mean something positive, because that's just my story. That's just who I became and who I am. So I have a feeling that these things kind of lurk always underneath, and they're kind of almost unconscious, and they're kind of like suggested replies on a phone. So they're just what pops up in certain situations, and they bypass a lot of our filters we might have about choosing a reaction. So this is the interesting thing about positive or pure intentions and seemingly good things, because it's so common in human history and everyday life that those with the best of intentions will often do crazy and very wrong things. And you wonder why. Are they consciously lying? Or what complexity and layering of unconscious factors is really like bubbling away under the surface? Yes, I guess I always wonder if these things kind of sit there dormant, you know, like a bear singing in the cave. Like there's just no sign it's there. Then we hit this situation and we're stressed or challenged in a certain way, and then bam, then we start to react this way. What's the chemical reaction basically? Right, now we might go back a sec to like unanticipated consequences and second order effects. So just to make sure this is like really specific and not too like abstract to follow. And sorry if it is, because actually making this episode, but the last time I rewatched the series was a little while ago, so I'm kind of going off notes and a bit of scant memory. It's not super fresh, but you know, you talk about some of the unanticipated consequences. You know, you got the airplane crash, right? That's a really good example of how Walter's actions lead to like some really bad outcomes for people connected to him, because of the death of like Jesse's, you know, landlord / girlfriend, and you know what that does to her father, and how it kind of in a roundabout way comes back to hit Walter's home. So I kind of love things like that. Like they're so complicated. No single character involved in that sequence gets to see how they're all linked together and how they're like the total causality of it, but they're kind of all affected by that circle. And Walter, and it comes back to Walter, but he can't really see at first how it comes back to him. So all those things are just so interesting about like the kind of cosmic or celestial forces of correction are like kind of crazy. And so it just shows you how nature is kind of dealing us punishment when we kind of veer from the natural and good path. So I think that's interesting to bring up as well.
Sorry to interrupt this incredible video about Breaking Bad and Walter White, but I asked my mum, what's one book that could have saved Walter White from all the mistakes he made? And she said, well, that's easy, Joe. It's the Bible. I go, well, I don't know if it's the Bible, Mum. I was going to say, holy shit, it's only Tuesday. The book that I wrote. I think that would have stopped Walter White dead in his tracks, triggered a whole wave of self-awareness all to the guise of a harmless, light-hearted, in the office style comedy. She said, no, it's the Bible. So I guess we agree to disagree. Maybe it is the Bible, but all the same. Check out the book. Holy shit, it's only Tuesday. Alright, back to the video.
Okay, now I want to kind of go a bit deeper into, the question of ego. So I think it's hard, to look at this show and say, look at Walter White as like a victim and look at him as not someone who's overcome by ego. The question's more around kind of how it expresses itself, how it makes him behave, and when it's acting, when it's not acting. It's got a beautiful cover story. It's all for family, right? So it's a very convincing story, of course, because you've got the visceral situation, is that the right word to use, of this family it's not going to be provided for. So you've got that as like a really good cover story. All our egos have a good cover story. It really makes things feel like necessity. It's very, very convincing, especially when we feed it, which is, therein lies the challenge. Okay, so you got this very convincing cover story, but the show's very clever at giving us moments that strip back the other reasons and reveal that it's probably the ego has taken over. Okay, so the best example is, I'm going to say something else before that. You talk about the Schwartz's offering to pay for his cancer treatment and to look after his family. I believe that's correct. Him not wanting that is okay, fair enough. A bit of pride in there, maybe it doesn't feel right, taking money, and it wounds your pride to be, a subject of charity. But you could also argue there's more strength in being able to humble yourself in that way. I would find that harder than doing the hard work to try and earn more money, for example, myself. So a lot of us can relate to that. And if we're assessing Walter, because he's a character, he's easier to judge than a human being. That's why I like talking about TV show characters and film characters and book characters instead of real people. You can give him like a C, at this point. And you can say, yeah, this is 50-50. But yeah, it's not purely about making sure he's got money for his family, is it? Because now it's, I want the money for my family and them to be provided for on certain terms. All right, so that's been made clear. And these certain terms seem to imply Walter being the hero, right? Being the one to provide. And of course, fair enough at this point. Fair enough. We're not condoning drug dealing yet. We're just saying that desire, that intention, we can give that a pass grade for where society is at. Then there's another point. There's all of these other points where his cancer is, he's in remission at one point. So it happens relatively early in the show. Very clever, surprise remission. So his original purpose for going on this journey, this chaotic journey, that initial problem has now been solved because he's around. But this is what I was talking about with off-ramps. Does he take the off-ramp? Hell no. He's Heisenberg. He's got to accommodate this Heisenberg cohabitating, personality character that's now sharing his soul, and so he's got to feed that beast. So when he goes into remission, that's not a reason to stop. Funnily enough, when they have enough money, when they clearly have enough, that's not enough reason to stop. And then the show does something very clever, just to paint how extreme Walter White's personality and ego becomes. They contrast him with Jesse, and they really develop the relationship between Walter White and Jesse. Now, to recap, Jesse Pinkman, it's a bit Reservoir Dogs about this. You got Jesse Pinkman and Walter White. Anyway, why do I have to be Mr. Pink? Because anyway, if you don't know Reservoir Dogs, you'll think I've lost my mind. But they develop this father-son relationship. And so I interpret that to be, because Pinkman was White's old high school student, and he takes on this fatherly relationship. But again, it's not the best fatherly relationship. It has a lot of control about it, and a lot of, again, justification and self-righteousness. Walter White, again, spoilers, justifies, I think, taking Jesse's money at times for Jesse's benefit, letting his girlfriend die for Jesse's benefit, basically murdering her. And he justifies some crazy things which are really bad for Jesse, but White gives himself the license to make those calls. And he's basically elevating himself into this now not just father-like but godlike, figure who gets to decide who lives and dies, what's right and wrong, and what he can justify for the sake of their survival. And the question starts to become, how much can you now justify? Now, where the contrast becomes really interesting is that Jesse, who has the drug dealer background, who talks like a rough kid from the streets, like, hey yo, Mr. White, he doesn't have the polish and the sort of like classic intelligence and intellectual look about him that Walter White does. But he's clearly the less toxic of the two. So you kind of given that's a beautiful perspective from the characterization in the show to go, hey, we've got Walter White here, family man, chemistry teacher, like socially ticking a lot of boxes, and you got this this in and out of drug dealer, his family have cast him out and all this stuff, who's a repeat offender and a user, and then you're given great perspective. That's why I love character contrast, because then you go like, Walter White's now here, and Jesse's the one who's like, man, why don't we stop? We've got enough. And Walter White just keeps giving he's just never short of justifications. Right? Never short of justifications. And the irony of the drug game in this show is that no matter how big you are, you're not done, and you're not free, and you're not safe. And as Gustav Fring is brought into the show, beautiful character and great acting. I forget the actor's name, but he's phenomenal. I love Gustav Fring. His issue, even though he's like a drug kingpin, is that he can't stop. He can't stop because he's got to meet supply. So he's got to keep producing huge amount, and this is something that Walter White leverages in their relationship when they get to this level. He's got to keep churning out, meeting demand, otherwise he's in trouble, he's in danger. Even though he's wealthy, he's got all this power, he's got all this influence, he's not safe. He's not safe either. So it's just fascinating, this idea of like, you can go in, you can get out, take a risk, but what is the long-term reality? What are the consequences? So yeah, I really love the contrast between White and Pinkman. Perhaps the most insane part of it, I forgot to mention this, obviously Hank, who's Walter's brother-in-law, is a DEA agent. When Hank is like giving up on finding Heisenberg, Walter White eggs him on and like kind of encourages him not to give up. If that's not the most insane thing, and it just shows how much it's become not about money or family or anything like that. And then I think you can kind of just revel and swim in the endless pool of tragic irony that this show and the Walter White character serves up. He's doing it for family, but the irony is he brings all this danger onto his family that wasn't there to begin with. So they start off way worse off. They end up way worse off than they started at, and it's supposed to be for them. Also, despite the amount of wealth they get, or the cash, it's hard for him to spend it. It's complicated. He has to launder it. He has to get a lawyer involved. And then he brings other people and complexity into his life. And then a lot of the time he doesn't even have much money. Like it gets stolen. There's all sorts of drama in the show. All very plausible within the narrative arc and reality of the show. And so, ironically, he doesn't even have much money in the end. Yeah, the relationship breaks down. So you kind of the marital conflict, the conflict with his son. His son turns on Skylar, then Walt Jr. turns on Walt Sr. You know, obviously there's, I don't know how many spoilers I can give away, but there's the death of Hank. There's all these consequences. So it's all, and that's just Walter White, but the tragic irony is just through the roof. You know, and even his own death is not a deterrent, because then it shifts to legacy. And it's all beautiful. And then there's that, you know, he talks about, I think Walt Sr. talks about his own dad dying and the wounded pride to his son, which you can tell is just him reenacting the drama. You know, it's like they've switched places and he's now projecting that onto his son. Psychologically, it's terrible, but it's just so well constructed. As a human behavior nerd, I just love it. I just love it. And then you got this big question lurking over this entire show, lurking over this video. Where are we? Where are you and I, if we're being honest, in relation to this? Right? We don't have drug dealers, and we have people collecting tax off us. We have lawyers, we have estates, and sometimes, you know, there's that. I mean, I think of a lot of the kind of the people who want to build their empire, you know, in this life, people who want success and they seem to want it at all costs, and they'll make out they feel like they're a good person in the everyday sense, but you know, they brag a lot on LinkedIn, or but it's just to establish credibility, of course. They're talking numbers, not to show off, but to celebrate milestones, because you got to celebrate milestones, right? That's the journey. You got to enjoy the journey, not the destination. You got these, you know, I'm doing it for other people. I'm doing this for my family. I want to pass it on so I can pass it on to future generations of my family. Yes, that's the motivation. It's not just about me. I'm enjoying it, of course. Like, why wouldn't I enjoy it? Why shouldn't I enjoy it? But it's about more than me. It's, you know, you got a lot of the modern entrepreneurs and people with the big dreams, maybe for show business or all that. And sometimes people love business. Sometimes people love the creative challenges. People love the arts. People love writing books. But sometimes they love the attention, the power, and being the man, being Heisenberg. You know, go for it, I say. Go for it. But yeah, you just see parallels. You see this as a metaphor for modern life. The complexity that can come with acquiring all that wealth, power, influence, status. It never being enough. And there was a funny rant, I think it's an old one, but Tim Dillon talking about laughing at mega rich people. I think maybe Elon Musk, and how the money gets boring. I think, no, it was Bill Gates. He was taking the mickey out of, and suggesting that, you know, as a rich person, the money starts to get boring once it's too easy to make money. So they normally chase influence, you know, that becomes something that's a bit more exciting, and then they're on that journey, and like, despite all they have, it's never really done. You know, in a Severus Snape sort of way, the show ends with, you know, Wyatt returning. He's separated from Skylar, but he returns. They're looking for him, and he goes to say, "Everything I did." And she says, "If you say you did this for your family, One more goddamn time. And then he shocks her by saying,
I did it for me. I enjoyed it.
and finally, we get the truth. And it was written once, or said, was it, that the truth shall set you free. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I don't know if the truth doesn't really set him free, but it's a mini redemption. A good ending for the show, I think, that he tries to right certain wrongs to the extent he can. But it's a tragic lesson of what not to do when you get a dumb idea to try and be a hero. And the trick is that this is all really psychological. This is all psychological. And we have psychological need. That's a very interesting part of human experience. It's not material need. So, if it really was about providing for his family, there were solutions, right? There were other things. This isn't a theme, because I was recently reading Les Mis, which is just sitting right over there, and the Jean Valjean thing, who, similar to the characters in this beautiful Vince Gilligan, I forget if there's another creative storytelling arc, who start off in an innocent place and are kind of forced into bad decisions. The Jean Valjean character in Les Mis is, sentenced to prison for 19 years for stealing a loaf of bread, but really it's because he tries to escape so many times, and then when he reflects back, and this is clearer in the book, not in the musical or show, they don't really go into this in the film. When he looks back, he had other options. And I think part of it is part of the theft and part of the drug dealing thing is about getting what appears to be a material need, but then tacking on our other psychological needs on top of it. And it's very clear to observe from the outside in the Walter White story. And so that's why it's hard to talk someone out of those, by the way, because they really tack it on to the necessity part. They really tack, I do this, of course, by the way. This is not me throwing stones out of a glass house. I would never live in a glass house for terrible real estate decision. Really hurts the resale, but also the likelihood of hypocrisy and the fragility of my position. It's one of the most interesting things about us, how we have these psychological boxes to tick and itches to scratch that are probably rooted not in a kind of meaningful internal journey that just gets, takes place in things like career and all the outside world stuff, the family, the relationships, where we can get to, what we can achieve, what we can create, what we can share. But it has its root in insecurity, which is obviously, I think, okay, but where does that lead us? So that's the interesting takeaway. That's the real message from Breaking Bad, okay? Not just drugs are bad, I think, mostly, especially meth, though I've never tried it. But this is the deeper stuff, okay? That's the message. Do we understand that now? That's the message from this show. Just remember what Joe said. Now, you can have your own thoughts, right? You can disagree. You can agree. You can have things I missed, other things you noticed, loved about the show. And you can comment. You can comment them on YouTube. And what does that do? That helps more people find videos like this. Help more people discover Joe Weeby, Joe Weeby's books, Joe Weeby's insights and knowledge, his podcast, his channel. And can help grow the Joe Weeby brand. And that's good for you because... Oh, sorry, no, I just realized I didn't... It doesn't really help you. It helps me. I really have to stop making that mistake. I'm going to go work on that. You keep opening doors, all right?